Good day everyone, so is there still a role for Kokomi to play in Genshin Impact 5.5? Looking at the latest Abyss data, she is right down there at a 6% usage rate with Mualani, surprisingly. And the thing is that Kokomi herself, as a battle healer, really has no more role in Genshin Impact. In other words, having your HP drained by enemies and then being able to take the offense and heal back your party whilst doing meaningful damage, that era is just long gone because we've gotten significant bump ups in terms of enemy HP inflation, and naturally a lot of more stronger offensive Hydro characters have come out, and so what you're left with is a character that at the time is very capable in terms of her role consolidation, and you're then going to use her for those more supportive capabilities. That's where you can use Kokomi, and as you saw earlier with the builds, a bit of a tenacity build with Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayer and supporting Mavwika in terms of being able to vaporize, that is at least one valid strategy for you to play. Now, do keep in mind that is not the strategy that's going to be the most meta, clearing the abyss as fast as possible type of strategy. It's just a strategy of I want to play Kokomi, are there any good teams? And that's what I wanted to showcase today. I do think someone like Mavwika and perhaps having a Constellation Zero Eon Sun, I think this is relatively reasonable for most people, but if you don't find this to be reasonable enough, I'm not going to say F2P, but at least reasonable in terms of being obtainable, then you can still use Kokomi on the second halves with a Shenhe, with an Ayaka and a Kazuha very, very successfully. In the case of the current Abyss, I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to speedrun it, but I did go through this again with a Varessa overload on the first half and a Kokomi team on the second half, and you can still relatively do it very, very easily. If you memorize where the enemies are positioned, you can perhaps set them up so that Ayaka's burst can melt one wave and hit the second wave, and your Kokomi should still support really, really well in that regard. One thing that is amazing about Kokomi is her ability to heal, and it's something you see on the first halves and the second halves. The fact that the jellyfish is stationary as opposed to some of the more modern characters like Chevreuse or Shalon that can heal you on demand wherever you are, that might be a bit of a disadvantage, but if you are someone using a character like Mavwika that just jumps all over, it's really not that hard to keep yourself within the jellyfish range. In fact, it's one of those criticisms that Kokomi received that I really think hasn't held up over time as well, even with characters that are extremely mobile. And one reason why that is because the enemies themselves don't move around that much. Yes, there are certain enemies that will reposition, but very often it's not that big of an issue. So you can see here we're now against the automaton, and it's just an enemy that now has repositioned, but you're at a point here where in any case you are gonna have to reset up. You're gonna have to get your next rotation going. So having the jellyfish being stacked there, it's not really going to be that important. Now I can reset the jellyfish, and there we go, we reset Janson, and then we just hit very, very hard here with Malvika. Well, okay, not as hard as you would with Sitlali and some of the more meta units, but if you are someone that has a more limited roster, this is certainly what you can do. In fact, one thing I would perhaps suggest in this team is replacing Fischl for someone like Shilonen, because you also get a bit of a damage bonus, and it would work really well with Mavwika, and you can still then run just the Vaporized team if you don't have Sitlali, like me, because I didn't buy two characters. I kept to the entire free-to-play kind of, perspective with Mavwika's release. So that's where we are. And I don't know, some people might say this is a bit slow in terms of clearing. I don't know. It really is up to you in terms of what you find reasonable, what you think is reasonable. I think the build and everything shown, besides being very mediocre and average, should give you that indication that if you do use Kokomi on the first half and you can play very well on the second half with your freeze team, whether it's Wrestling or Ayaka, you can still beat the Abyss comfortably. So from that perspective, as someone that wants to use Kokomi, you've definitely got a lot of options, although really to be You can see it, like you just line up the enemies and you can hit multiple of them. That's something that's certainly doable, and I've seen some very competitive C0 Ayakas that you can do that with as well. But in terms of options, you can still use Kokomi. It's just that nowadays there are a lot better options, and this is one thing that I've noted way back when we talked about how good Kokomi is, because she offered a lot in terms of her kit, and then over time, as more and more characters come out that can each fulfill more of those niches, because remember, she's a role consolidator. As you get more characters that can fill each of those consolidated roles and can do it better, the use of Kokomi is going to become less and less, and I think that prediction has played perfectly. But as someone that still loves Kokomi, it's just so much fun being able to be here against two enemies that honestly just constantly drain your health, and then you can just quickly heal up again. You've got a tank. Kokomi still tanks very, very well. You can just plop down your jellyfish where you need to, and then your Mavrika is going to be like safe and sound. So as I'm taking hits, I'm just going to heal up, and you can see I'm just rotating around my jellyfish, and this gives me a lot more survivability. And the cool thing is, because I've got the Kokomi jellyfish, I can then take a bit more like chances because I'm constantly being healed. I don't need to play carefully. That's one other indirect form of increasing your DPS against enemies that are constantly attacking back, that cannot be interrupted. And that's one of the cool things about the jellyfish, although the same is true for any other healer. In any case, where I think Kokomi stands currently is that she is a bit of an outdated unit. You can use her in the Spiral Abyss if you know how to play her, but unfortunately I don't think her kit is as flexible as some of the newer units, so this is really a character you're going to play for the love of it, and as you can see, like me, just to goof around with in the Abyss, and especially in the Overworld, because we still very much love Kokomi. But that's my take on it. Alright guys, that's what I've got to say. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think down below. Cheers!